Prison is like the streets. And literally, what you find in the streets, you can find in prison. So I have to tell this part of the story because hopefully you're not going there. But if you do go there, pay attention to the unseen and unknown threats that exist, not just in prison, but in the world, vice versa. It's not uncommon necessarily to end up with a relationship or in a relationship with a female staff member, guard, etc. when you're in prison. It's just hard. You got to think about it. The odds are not in your favor. But for her in that situation, or if it's vice versa, just imagine somebody walking in to a prison surrounded by 1,000 men, and she's one of the few women in there, and she's then in there for 12 hours a day. Usually what happens is she's in the pod. Guys are approaching her. She eventually she'll feel a certain type of pressure, not necessarily threat, but an uncomfortability if she's not necessarily sure of herself in that environment. Guys approach females in there to wear them down. I just want to say that. Not all the time, but the majority of the time. And not just them, any guard, staff, etc., because they're trying to get something in. But usually what happens then is, just through nature, because so many people are approaching, she has to interact with so many people from the opposite sex. Eventually, there's an individual that sparks her eye, catches her attention, etc. It's only natural. You're surrounded by 1,000 people. You're in a grocery store. You know what I'm saying? Whatever. You like vegetables, here you go. You're in farmer's market, right? So what happens then is, once you're able to get into that relationship, you got to keep it quiet. But when you're on a place like Greensville, people didn't care. I remember, even though I had been out the kitchen since then, walking in there and literally seeing people booed up. Every kitchen supervisor that walked in there had a boyfriend that was a prisoner that was locked up in that kitchen. I promise you, it was just like the streets. And there were cameras in there, but I guess nobody was really paying attention. And I had my thing going on too. If you've been paying attention to this part of the story, I ended up in a relationship with a former kitchen staff that worked at the prison, who had to leave. She left, so basically I didn't get sent to a level 6, and she didn't get fired. She quit. She walked off after guys started running their mouth. The reason they started running their mouth, well, one of the persons that was close to me, one of my AKA right mans, he had to tell his right man. So beware the right-hand man syndrome, because every right hand has a right hand. Message. And that's what happens. That's what transpired for my downfall, our situation. But also what happens is, once word travels that you were that guy that ended up booking that female on the compound, that one, because she was highly sought after, you get a certain reputation, not just from the guys as being somebody that made it happen, but also from the rest of the female staff in there. I liken it to being no different in the streets. Sometimes when you're married, you're approached more. I'm just being honest. It happens. Why? Because they see that you're of value. Somebody wants you. And it's the same thing in there. I had gained the reputation of being the one that had got her. And now some of the women in there wanted me. I remember being approached by one female guard, and she just walked by during count time and rubbed her hand across my chest. And she said, "Hey, feel free to come down here and help me in this closet. I got to get some supplies." And let me tell you, it went down in the closet. What saved me in that moment, two things. One, I love my girlfriend. I didn't want to do her wrong, even though I was in prison, even though I was a man, even though I had the opportunity, even though it was extremely hard. It was a test, because you got to understand, when you're in prison, you don't get physical touch or anything unless you're in visitation. Man, I didn't go. I didn't also go because she had a reputation. I had knew that I wouldn't have been the first guy that she met in the closet to handle supplies with. So I turned it down. And it was funny because when I did that, she immediately caught an attitude with me. And probably within that same week had wrote me a charge for something extremely petty. I think it was a washcloth on the end of my bed or something. This is a person that, because I didn't want to pursue their advances while I was incarcerated, tried to mess with my freedom. Now here's where the story gets really crazy. Not only was she writing certain charges and being vindictive or whatever, she had put a target on her back inadvertently. She had a reputation of being somebody that was promiscuous on the camp. But let me tell you, this would not be the first situation. I have been on institutions where I'm going to use the word, solicitation rings have been busted up, comprised of a team of female guards, etc., that were just doing their thing on a compound, making money and going home every night. Well, with her reputation, of course, it was not just amongst the staff, but it was amongst the guys in there. And what was happening was she was taking care of some of the guys in there. When I say some, evidently it was more than 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. She was going from pod to pod, building to building, and when she felt like it, she did. That's what she was doing. But it came to a stop. It came to an end. And what happened was two of the guys that she was dealing with ended up contracting, I think that's the word, an STD. Now here's where it gets really hairy. The physical ailments of the initial STD, watch what I say now, which were gonorrhea, as the story was told, is what prompted them to go to the hospital or to the nurse's station and then be rushed to the hospital. What happens when a guy get something like an STD in there, they automatically do an investigation because they got to figure out where it came from. But guess what happened? Two guys popped up with it. Now, and on top of that, when you get rushed to the hospital or whatever, and they're trying to identify what you have, they do a blood test. So the next thing that happened was both of them ended up testing positive for HIV. Now, I do not make light of that topic, but I have to illustrate a point that everything that glitters isn't gold. And a lot of times in prison, we fall victim to situations and opportunities because they're not often given to us. But I look at that moment and I say to myself, I'm so grateful I had enough reason not to go because it was hard, y'all. I'm just being honest with you. As a man away from society, lacking physical touch, even though I was in a relation, I had been away for years. And she was going to, I don't know, allow me to have some fun or whatever. But I didn't, and I didn't fall into that. And I don't know what the actual number of the individuals that ended up contracting, STDs, etc. But yeah, that's what happened. She ended up, of course, getting walked off there. They talked about it. The guards, if you don't know, when things happen like that, they talk to the prisoners because they're there for 12 hours a day. So we got the whole rundown, the whole tea from them. But it was crazy. So watch out for that too in prison, folks. But more importantly, don't go.